Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of American Grit. We have a very exciting episode planned for you. Today, I'm joined by Sydney Gabower and Army veteran Greg Wells. Greg, welcome to the podcast, buddy. How are you doing today?
I'm well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're very excited to talk about Station Dog, but you are a representative of the K9s For Warriors, and we have a really good relationship, we being Grunt Style. Monthly we bring K9s For Warriors through Grunt Style. We're honored to work with Randy and Danny and have that relationship here in Texas. So can you tell the people at home a little bit about K9s For Warriors and kind of what their purpose is in the space here?
Sure. So, I found K9s For Warriors in 2015, and from that point forward, I kind of guess just embedded, right? So Army veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. I was a contractor in Afghanistan. And then in 2012, I left and I had PTSD and I had to go seek treatment, and actually go do adult things to help myself and not avoid the problems anymore. So part of that was finding K9s For Warriors. And then when I found them, what I noticed was a family. And it was started by a mom named Sherry Duvall in 2012, if I remember correctly. Maybe 11, one of those two, for her son, who was also a detection dog handler in Iraq. And he and I became friends when I went to the course. And then, I kind of slowly went through it and asked for a job and then begged for a job and then kind of internet stalked him and said, hey, we should talk about me getting a job. And, I kind of poked. And from there, I was selected to become a trainer and then a warrior trainer, then move and do all the different things. And part of that process, I learned about why canines existed and how it was set up. And in the long story short, it's about a mother's love. It's a mother's love for her son who has PTSD, and she wanted to help him. So they set up K9s For Warriors, which is a dog program, a service dog program for disabled veterans. And we graduated our 1,000th warrior last month. So
amazing.
Part of that is learning about mental health, and next month is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so we've morphed from just a dog organization to a lot more different things. Here in San Antonio, we have a kennel, and then we have a separate warrior housing area where we only teach warriors how to use their dogs. In Florida, we have kind of similar setup where we have kennels and then we have warrior areas. And those are areas where we only teach warriors how to use their dog, and then we take them out and do public access training with their service dogs. And we go forward with them in life after the fact as not customer service, but kind of family. So you have to treat them like family, treat them as equals, and then follow up with them usually every month with a phone call or an email, and then develop that relationship and cultivate things.
Okay, so it sounds like, did you go through the training while you were learning all this? Did you have a service dog at the same time?
Yeah, so in 2015, my wife found K9s For Warriors on Facebook, because I don't do social media. I'm not competent with that stuff. And she's like, you should check this out. So I had a Facebook account, but I basically have it so I can look at pictures of my buddies or whatever. And so she's like, check it out. So I looked at their Facebook page, and then that's not for me. I don't want a dog. I don't think that's going to be the answer for me.
Was it too real for you?
No, I think what the deal was she found it. I didn't find it, right? So it's my wife found it. And I think what the thing was if it's for me, I'm going to find it. I'm a man. I can do this. So much of my PTSD is not being able to help others and people and feeling like I'm inadequate for things. So my concept or my thought behind it was, if I didn't find it, it's not for me. I should be doing all this stuff. But having said that, 3 days later, she was right. I applied, right? Wow. And, I told her, you should, you remember that thing you told me about? And she said, yeah. I'm like, yeah, I applied.
Could you imagine having dogs when you were in the military? And then kind of a question for you, Sydney, when you were around K9s.
I was.
What was that experience like? Can you inform everybody what you did with K9s?
Yeah, so I was actually a canine handler for almost 4 years in the Air Force.
primarily working with bomb detection dogs. My first dog was patrol certified as well, but the dog that I ended up adopting after retirement was not patrol certified, so I kind of lost that side. And there is such a difference between a military working dog, a service dog, and then what we're about to talk about today with the station dogs. There is a vast difference. I would even say, safe to say, police K9s versus military K9s.
Yeah.
So even though we are handlers, we do work with dogs all day, every day. That relationship is very different as a handler versus also just being around these dogs. You know, they're not really for emotional purposes. They're seen as tools. And even though we develop that relationship and we could probably benefit in similar ways with our dog, it's very different than what they would provide for you and what they ended up doing for you and what you're helping others with now.
So what is a station dog? We've said, you know, we've talked about service dogs, and we'll get into the differences and all that. But no, you know what? Let me back up there. I want to back that up. Yeah, I want to stick to the situation.
Let's do it.
Why can veterans benefit from a canine?
So service dogs, so there's a bunch of studies out, and we've been privileged enough at K9s to be involved in a lot of those studies, specifically with Purdue University and then University of Arizona. You probably read some of those things.
Yes.
It's about cortisol levels and cortisol regulation in your brain. It's about releasing oxytocin in your brain. It's basically rewiring your brain. The more time you spend with these dogs, and the more you integrate them into your life and your workplace and like your private life and everything, the more they help your brain rebuild itself. So the more, think of it this way, one of the best analogies that a friend of mine had years ago, it's like when you wake up in the morning, you boot up your computer, like if you were to actually look at the algorithms and stuff that like does this little spike and it's doing all these things where it processes, a normal person does that and then it regulates itself, right? But with PTSD or a TBI or with MST, something with when you're basically waking up, your cortisol levels are spiking constantly. They never stop spiking throughout the day. They never regulate. What we've seen with the research is dogs help regulate that cortisol level. You know, it's after a matter of, it can be as quick as a couple of weeks. Normally it's 6 months. You start to see like a more steady approach to the day. Somebody is getting more in their rhythm. You see more of that older person kind of returns, or like the person from the past returns before all the trauma hit. And you see them being able to actually commit to things more often and just kind of live instead of being all secluded and a recluse. They can kind of engage more.
It's amazing.
So it all has to do with the brain chemicals and the kind of the human-animal bond is part of that. We believe that's really how it goes.
Yeah, so 1,000 warriors have benefited from this.
Yeah, 1,000 graduates, several thousand dogs have been rescued through the program. That's one of our other priorities is rescuing dogs. And then a lot of relationships and connections. And, you know, we see at K9s, the dog program, the service dog program is really our foot in the door to that warrior, that veteran's life, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think of it, I give you a dog. It's not, okay, here's your dog. We trained you for 3 weeks and goodbye. It is, here's your dog. You're one of us. You remember what it's like to be part of a tribe, right?
Community.
Yeah. There's a lot to be said for community. You can't really put a finger on it till you're part of it, right? You guys have been there. When you take that away from somebody or they leave it, then you miss it instantly. And then when you find it again, even with something as weird as a bunch of random shelter dogs that we've turned into service dogs, and now we're all training as a unit out in town at an IKEA of all places, where it's nothing but like a maze to get you lost on purpose and stress you out, but that dog calms you and helps you navigate that maze. Mm-hmm. And then you realize you've got 7 other dudes with you, or maybe 12. And so you get that community back. And then also part of that is like the service aspect after the fact. It is not just, here's your dog, welcome back to the community, we love you, we mean it, we'll email you every so often. We have meetups, we go meet in public, we train in public together after the fact. We do events together. We ask warriors if they want to be an ambassador for us and kind of help spread the word about things. There's a lot that goes into it. We see it as an open door to like the mental health aspect of a service dog. And then we can give them resources down the road if they have some of those, like not like a relapse, but if there's an issue. We're not mental health providers. I'm not a social worker. I'm not a head shrinker, but I know them, right? So now that you and I trust each other, I will give you a referral to my friend who just so happens to be a social worker.
Yeah, that's literally kind of our relationship here at Grunt Style. We have our umbrella, the shirt you're wearing, support those who serve. We are on the front lines with police officers and fire departments and our veterans out there, military law enforcement, and we see what the kind of the issues they're going through. We understand their needs, and it's great that we have the relationship here in Texas because we keep K9 at the forefront.
Right.
We bring any veterans like, hey, how's your mental health? Have you thought about a service dog? And most times, 9 times out of 10, they're like, I wouldn't know where to start. And we immediately are K9 For Warriors.
Yeah.
And there are others out there. There are multiple organizations, like K9s For Warriors out there because there's that much need.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so the question I have is, with that much need, does every dog get used? And I know we were having a conversation earlier. In your experience, you've seen dogs just sitting there. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So with the military working dog aspect, something I had asked you earlier was like, have you ever thought about maybe partnering with the DoD as far as taking these dogs and rescuing them in a sense from the program that they wash out from? There's been 50 plus dogs just sitting in the kennel here at Lackland alone.
They're washouts?
They're washouts. So maybe they don't pass the patrol aspect or they don't pass detection. Whatever that part of it is, sometimes they can still be utilized, but sometimes it's a temperament issue. And we spoke about that too. They just don't have the temperament to be a military working dog. Maybe they don't have the aggression or they just don't have that detection ability. And they sit because they can't find the right placement for them in a home or the right person. Maybe they have medical needs. So a program like this with being rescue based first, being able to provide that home to a veteran that's probably even more capable of caring for them. I mean, it gives these dogs opportunities just like it gives the veterans opportunities for healing. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I think with programs such as, like your detection dog programs, those are dogs that are bred to do that stuff, right? That dog wouldn't be around if we didn't have that specific program, and it needed to be fed certain things for it to be active and produce. Like at the airport, when they're going back and forth and sniffing bags and what, you've got to have the drive for that. And if they don't have that, if they just want to make friends and lick face, TSA ain't using that.
Exactly.
I mean, and I don't blame them. But at the end of the day, they've got a job they got to do, and I think and we have procured dogs from them in the past. And I think there's ways to rekindle that romance from back in the day, but we just got to swipe right, That's the limit of my social media right there. We just got to swipe right on each other again and find that connection again, and then have the space for that. Kennel space is such a big deal. I liken kennel space to kind of the same thing as having enough space for inmates in jails and prisons. Like, you only have so much ability to house so many things or so much gas in your tank. Anything else is overflow, and you got to have a place to put it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But
Yeah, the term I want to talk about here you use is washout, right? Because the dogs that you're using for this program in Station Dog, these aren't failures.
Right.
They're not just like when we're in the military, you get recycled.
Yeah.
Right? So you have veterans, who need the emotional support. You have these canines who are washed out, but either highly trained and skilled in other things. What is Station Dog? And let's go that route. And how did the need for in 2020? How did you say, like, what event happened? I want to talk about the event that happened in 2020 that led to Station Dog.
Yeah. So we use the term now career change. For one, it sounds better, and two, it really is a career change, right? So we're not taking dogs that are going to be able to help a warrior and take them out of that pipeline and then take them away from that warrior. In essence, they don't meet what we need for them. There's a selection course, if you will. So think of it as you're going through, like back in the 1900s, when I was in the Army, if you're going through RASP or RIP, right, you're selected. You caught that, right? So back when we wore green, real green back then, so if you're going through a selection course, there's standards that have to be met. The dogs have the same thing, right? So they can be great dogs up until a point and then not meet the final standard for that specific job, and then we'll repurpose them. And that kind of plays into 2020, realistically. So in 2020, of course, COVID happens. COVID's a big deal everywhere in America, all over the world. But it's really a big deal in first responders. People don't understand that. You've got mission essential people that didn't go home and stay home. They were out there pushing their squad cars with masks on, looking like idiots, like the rest of us wearing masks. But, they had to go out and perform to help people. They're first responders. Their job is to be public servants. The cost of public service is high, right? In the military, the cost of your service is high when you deploy. The rest of the time when you're local, back home training, it's just the job. That's the way I looked at it. But when you deploy, like, it's life or death, right? You're pulling guard duty, you're going on combat patrol, you're doing all these different things. With first responders, it's life or death every day. And maybe it's not theirs, but they're exposed to it every day. I was a cop for 15 years, and every day you put on your duty belt, you put on your badge, you turn on your radio, your body armor, and all that stuff. And it's to the end of the day I get shot at. It's to the end of the day that I get in a big accident chasing some dude, right?
Well, the other side of that is your family, your kids.
The other side is your family,
right? Like your kid has to see you. You still have to. Hey, I'll see you after school.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go clean up some mess really quick.
Yeah, there's so much that goes into it, and that compassionate detachment that you have as a first responder, police, fire, rescue, EMS, dispatch. What we've found with medical examiners is you have to detach yourself from what you're seeing, otherwise you take it home. And part of that, when you detach yourself, you kind of separate yourself in your mind from what reality is. And I think some studies would show that PTSD is like a lot of the inability to like reintegrate back into normal society in your brain. So if you compartmentalize too many things and you don't process them, now suddenly that's your reality, right? So now suddenly every day when I walk out in the parking lot, I'm looking for people who are trying to spot me. I'm looking in my rearview mirror to see if somebody's actually following me. Like, it's not paranoia. It's called being prepared at that point in time, right? It's looking out for your best interest, and that's the heightened state of a first responder. So with that, in 2020, after a 20-year career, a friend of ours at K9s For Warriors committed suicide. He was a cop in just outside of Jacksonville, Florida, and he was a good friend of ours. And we know through our dog program, we train in a lot of different places, and that includes police stations, because we want dogs to know like what gear looks like and like metal detectors and stuff look like. We want them to be well exposed to things. In developing those relationships, we met a friend, and he ultimately committed suicide. And part of what we knew with our service dogs is so much how the dogs help people heal. So we didn't know quite then in 2020 what the correlation would be with first responders, but we know now. Well, at least I think we know now, because this is my full-time gig. But in 2020, it was, hey, we want you to have this dog. It's going to help you. And it did. And we were like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. So then 2 other departments right next to where this officer had committed suicide, they didn't have traumatic events. Like, they weren't looking for somebody to help them, but they noticed that the culture started to shift from, we're very depressed, we need help, but we don't know how to ask for it, to now we're popping in to see the dog. And a byproduct of that was checking in with the Sarge, checking in with the LT, seeing the chief,
creating conversations,
creating conversation, becoming more of a tribe again, becoming more like part of something. And then from there, it just kind of kept going and going and going. We started in Northeast Florida, and at Jacksonville Beach, and Neptune Beach, and Atlantic Beach, and then Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. And the next thing you know, we're hearing from Daytona and Hillsborough County and Tampa and down in Miami, and we're like, we're onto something. This is working. And then so we can go down the whole rabbit hole with this, because I'm stupid passionate about it.
What does today look like?
Today is 58 dogs after that. We're at number 58 as of yesterday, and dogs all over the U.S. I've got them in Connecticut, DC, Ohio, Michigan, soon to be Minnesota, California. I've got them here in Texas, all over the place in Florida, with state, local, federal agencies, you name it. And it's about mental health. It's not about like a true service dog. You know, they don't mitigate the signs and symptoms of a disability. They're therapy dogs by trade. That's their actual certification. I call them a support canine, but they're actually officially known as a station dog. There's a lot that goes into it. I fell into a big, deep rabbit hole in 2020 and fell in love with it. And because at the time I was working our warrior stuff. So I was working all of our, what we call warrior operations, which is application to we accept you, we get you here, my people train you, my people take care of you after you graduate. And I oversaw all that. And in 2021, they offered me the station dog position and I jumped on it.
So the curriculum, the bricks you're laying, I mean, that's all you and your passion.
Well, it's not all
and
me.
the team
Right.
that you, the division that you had for it, and the team that's helping you push this forward. Yeah.
So the push behind it was let's help cops and firefighters. That was the initial push, first responders, right? And then we realized it's not just cops and firemen out there doing their thing. Who answers the phone, right? Who doesn't get to know what actually happened at the end of that call? Who hears a 10-year-old screaming for help and doesn't know what happens? It's the dispatchers, right? And then past that, you know, it's like support staff that see officers coming in with ripped uniforms or, you know, like bloody gurneys and stuff like that, who sees that, but they have no idea what they've been through, and they just see emotion and trauma, and they're exposed to it too, right? And then, you know, take, for example, the medical examiner's offices here in Bexar County. Feel for them. You know, that is a tough job. Who, in my mind, does the public see what they see every day?
Absolutely.
Not even close.
Hell no. Do they want to? No. They want to go barbecue. They want to go hang out with their friends. They want to go to the mall or whatever. These guys go in there every day and they see trauma, like all day. That is their job. And how they do it, a 20-year career, I don't know. It's so much, I think, of being able to process things objectively and being able to kind of move through life one case at a time, if you will, with them. But then there's the mental health aspect of, you know, Uvalde, a mass casualty thing, a trailer full of dead people. That all gets processed somewhere, right?
Someone has to process.
Somebody sees that. Somebody has to help move those people. Somebody has to talk to families, you know. Does a police chaplain do all that by himself? No, this is a team effort. And I think what we're finding now, and in particular in law enforcement and firefighting and the fire services, what we've found is mental health has been ignored, much like in the military, until GWAT. And then we figured out that PTSD is real. It's not just shell shock and that guy will be fine in 10 days or whatever. I think what they're finding out is since like basically the 50s and 60s, these dudes have been having these problems and it's been ignored. And there's such a stigma. Like when you were in the military, if you knew you had a problem, you wouldn't say anything because you were afraid they were going to kick you out. Like that's your identity.
Yeah, was it like that when you were in the military?
It was 100% like that, and the culture did change. I started to see it, the kind of shift about halfway through when I served, but there are still the people that you know relate to. Oh well, I have this issue too, and it's the stigma of losing your job or getting kicked out, like a job like security forces, being a handler, having to deploy. You don't get those opportunities if you have anything mental health related.
Yeah, if I'm not good
it's
enough
scary.
anymore, you're going to take my gun and badge.
Right.
What am I going to do?
Right.
Like,
And you
that's
feel
my
less
identity,
than.
right? I can't let my bros down.
Yeah.
Those are my guys, right? I can't do that. There's so much of that in first response. Like first of all, first responders, about a third of them are veterans, right? Depending on which study you look at least a third of them.
I would say it's probably more.
There's
They're
probably
continuing
more.
service, yeah.
Yeah, there's probably more. I mean, if we count the Coast Guard, right? There might be a little bit more. The Space Force, I have no idea.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. They might have satellites on law enforcement. I'm not sure. They didn't in the 1900s. I know I didn't have one. So,
Yeah, that 1900s comment is killing me.
but so many of them are veterans, right? And you find your way to that because public service is kind of part of who you are. You're designed at that point to help people, and you don't take into account the cost that you're giving up, right? You give up a lot being a first responder or a public servant. The cost is very high. Yeah.
For a lot longer than people realize, too.
Yeah, if you look at it, you want to do, say you joined San Antonio PD, you want to do a 20-year career, pop smoke, go retire, live in Colorado or something like that, you're probably going to have problems. There's a high probability you're going to have problems after a 20-year career. All that stress, all that anxiety, all the trauma accumulates. There's a study that came out in 2018. A friend of mine just sent this to me this morning. I believe it was on firefighters. 95% of them at one point in 2018 of all these firefighters polled, I want to say it was in New York, stated they had been exposed to a traumatic event. I'm not surprised. They're firefighters, They go to fires, things burn, they respond to accidents, just like cops do.
And they show up on people's worst day.
On the worst day, all day long. You don't show up on somebody's best day, They're calling you for a reason. Or the cop driving by in their Explorer sees something, they see somebody on their worst day. They ain't just, it ain't all roses. There's a community engagement aspect of being a first responder, and that's a good thing. Showing people that you're human, but most of the time when you're calling them, you need them for something that's probably bad.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
So who's taking care of the service member after they're done taking care of the community?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. The hard part is, the answer is, I think realistically, there's nonprofits that are doing it. I don't think there's a whole lot of city governments that are efficiently doing it, or even county governments, because I don't think they truly, I mean us in general as a society, I don't think we understand the cost that these people are paying for us.
You guys are nonprofit, so you guys,
Yeah, we're a nonprofit. There's a lot of other nonprofits that are in this space working for mental health, trying to help these people out. But the stigma of asking for help is strong with those guys.
Yeah.
And gals, don't get me wrong, both of them, male and female.
I've been telling people, so are you guys familiar with the term PSYOP?
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to conduct a PSYOP on our own to help people just drop their guard. Oh shit, I didn't know I was being talked to.
Yeah.
This speaks to me. Oh yeah, you're part of a PSYOP, buddy.
Yeah.
But it's a good PSYOP, not a bad PSYOP. Right?
Well, I was talking to a guy yesterday. He's with Up Here Support Network here in Texas, and it's a new program they funded through the state. And it's really, I think we kind of chatted briefly about it, but how he does it is a lot like that. They have an anonymous app. You can say, hey, I might like to hang out with a guy and talk about some stuff, but not a social worker. I don't want a head shrinker up here. So then this dude comes out, he's a certified law enforcement officer. He can ride along with them, commissioned, and then just chat and hang out. And how he does it is he kind of just chats and hangs out the first hour or two, and then he kind of steers a conversation. He kind of drives the boat a little bit, and then asks a few questions, and they just kind of develop some rapport, and then go from there. The neat part about it is, what if you integrate a dog into that, right? So what if I show up with 10 sheriff's deputies, right? Big, burly, beefy sheriff deputies, and they show up with their body armor and their badges and their gun belts, that's authority. But what if they show up and they got a dog with them, and they're not the bitey kind? They're the kind that you can pet because they're goofy looking and they look like they want to be pet. You don't see a bunch of cops that are authority figures. You see human beings, and then you instantly lower your guard. So that's part of the concept behind the station dog program.
I love that.
So I think we were talking about this earlier. I think probably we're at a place where we can talk about it. The difference between a service dog and a station dog.
Sure. So boilerplate, service dogs are dogs that have been trained to perform a function or a behavior that mitigates a disabled person's disability. There's no certification, or there's no sign-in sheet. There's no national registry. It is a dog that has been trained to mitigate signs and symptoms of one person's disability. That is a service dog. There's no breed restrictions. There's ADA law that protects their public access rights and where they can and cannot go. Think of that as, if it's a sterile environment, such as an ER or an operating room in an ER, you can't have the dog in there. But if you're in there, you're unconscious, right? So it doesn't matter. Somebody else can take the dog for you.
There's no PTS happening.
Yeah, right. So service dogs help one person. Easiest way to equate that is that their job is to help one person. Emotional support animals are not service dogs. Those are just like dogs that make people happy. That's your dog at the house that people like find registries online, and because they love Cujo so much, they got to register it as an ESA or whatever. They're usually good boys and girls. They have 0 public access rights. They usually don't have any training. It's just something that somebody loves. And then you have therapy dogs. There's a bunch of other different classifications, but therapy dogs are dogs that have been trained specifically for the handler to be able to control them, to work them through a kind of like a problem. But they kind of have to want to do it. So you don't have to force the dog to do these things. The dog should like be amicable to doing all these things for you, but be well behaved. And so if you give it a command or a behavior, it should do it for you. Those dogs are for the masses. Therapy dogs, I like to say, are to make everybody happy, to include the handler. And then you have like offshoots, like we call them support canines. Some people call them like police services canines, which is kind of a play on words because those are really your apprehension, detection, dual purpose stuff, like you were talking about. And then there's like crisis response canines, which are kind of like a therapy dog, but not necessarily on steroids, but like a therapy dog that is going to do the things that the handler wants to do regardless, kind of thing. And they're going to do it in the safest manner possible. Cause we're talking about responding to like mass casualty events where there's like building collapses and bridge collapses. And like, where do you go debrief that stuff? On rubble, people coming off the pile. So they got to learn like safety things. A lot of that is handler training. And from what I'm seeing anyway, handler training on like, wear your helmet here and go over there. And then when you hear the sound, that means there's going to be an explosion. You should go somewhere else. Like just stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yes, I do.
Yeah,
I have lots.
I do, yeah. So as far as the handlers are concerned, are these people that have to go through any prerequisite training to qualify as a handler for a station dog? Are they chosen by K9s For Warriors? How does that work?
Sure. So for the station dog program, usually the agency puts out like a memo, or they take volunteers, like who wants to have a dog? Who wants to take this dog home?
And then someone has to care for it.
Somebody's gonna have to care for it, right? There's very few stations where the dog actually stays in that building. Those are usually manned. They're always manned 24 hours a day, and they're typically like a Department of Public Safety. So there's like a hybrid police, fire, rescue. Like they have cops and firemen. Like they respond in the same vehicle. Firefighters carry guns. It's weird, but they're 24 hours a day. They have their own dispatch. It's a house. So there's a few of those that are involved in the program, but most of the time the dogs go home with the handler. And so once they identify, say Jacksonville Sheriff's Office says, I've got a handler for another dog, we're approved. We interview them. We determine what's best for that person in a dog. And then like, what does that agency want to do with that dog in the program? Because there's a little subsects that they have from officer involved shooting stuff to just peer support to just community engagement. And then we basically pair them with that dog at that point, and then we place them with the handler, train them, spend some time with them, and off they go.
Great. How long is the training usually?
For the dog or the handler?
Kind of both together once you do make that placement.
So the neat thing is, as an offshoot of the service dog program, we don't select dogs specifically for, like brand new green dogs specifically for station dog. Everything comes and feeds the service dog program because that is our priority. That is our bread and butter, and that is what we want to do. I'm a graduate of the program. I support that fully, right? Not all dogs make it into that. So it takes, if we're going to do a class of 12, we will probably have to have trained at least 40 dogs at some point to get to that class of 12. And not all of them are going to make the program. So when they career change, it's for a number of reasons. Hip coverage or their drive, social aptitude is a big deal, which is just code that they like to make friends a lot. And I look for dogs like that. Some of them are just too rowdy. Some of them we think will calm down when we select them, but they don't. Some of them kennels are a jail, and they have specific behaviors in those. Once they get out of that kennel, then you see a different dog. So when you select them, you think you're getting one thing, and then you get back home and it's a Honda, right? It's not. It's not what you thought you got, right? So, but dogs like that don't make the program, I evaluate to see if they would be a good therapy dog or a support canine.
So what makes a good station dog?
So typically a little older is better. I like them to be a little bit more mature. I like them to be fairly calm, but I like them to be able to read the room. And there's ways that we do a temperament test that checks that. They have to have a little bit of drive, but not a whole lot. I don't require it. I need a dog that can be lazy enough to sit there and let a cop cry, right? And because once you get them there, they're going to be there for a minute. You know, you got hard people, and they need to be able to spend that time. We also look for height and weight. Hip coverage isn't necessarily a thing for us. It is for the service dog world, but age, height, and weight, temperament's a big deal for us. And then knowing specific agencies need a hypoallergenic dog, then I'll look for poodles or doodles. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would take a hyperallergenic dog, personally.
They're unicorns. They're hard to find.
I can
Well,
imagine.
you say that, but every time the warrior class visits Grunt Style, it's nothing but doodles and poodles.
Well, that's
That's all it is.
You know, the reason they have them is because they have an allergy, right? And so we require them. Yeah, we require them to go to a doctor and give us some paperwork because they're hard to find. So because they're hard to find to become a service dog, it makes them more hard for me to find to turn into a station dog.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. You know, the reason that, agencies don't, it's not about like fur with agencies. It's not about like uniforms getting fur on them because these guys are out there covered in mud and stuff. It's about allergens for them, but not only their staff, but the people that they are going to interact with. So if there's victim and witness services that they're going to do, what if they're allergic, but they like dogs? You don't want them leaving covered in dog fur, sneezing for hours, because then that's just another liability that the sheriff or chief has to deal with.
So 1,000 warriors.
Yeah.
58 station dogs.
Yeah.
No sign of slowing down. So for service members or in law enforcement watching this, how can agencies get involved? And what is that process for them?
So service members that are interested in a service dog, get on our website and apply, right? It's easy. It's a click of a mouse and the process begins. You can start the application and pause anytime you want. If you have a problem, you can reach out to our office and they'll help you figure out the problem and move forward. If you stop during the application and realize that maybe it's not right for you at this time, you can always hit the pause button. You can call them and say, hey man, give me a little bit, and they'll work with them on that stuff. For station dog program, it's get on our website, go to the station dog page, and request information. And basically that's a way for me to get their phone number so I can start talking and stalking. And that is I make a phone call, I send them some emails, I send out some info on like what the program looks like, kind of figure out what they will potentially want to do if they have approval to move forward. And then once they get their approval, the process is different at everywhere you go. Sometimes with the city government, sometimes the city council has to vote on it to accept the donation kind of thing. Sometimes if it's a constitutional officer, like the sheriff can say yes, and we'll do what we want. That's usually how that goes. Fire departments are set up a little different. They'll usually have to work the system to go through like a city manager or the mayor's office or something. But once they get the approval, then I send them our application, which is a lot like a car lot outside of Fort Bragg. Like you want it up, you're financed, right? You're approved. So
18%.
Yeah, it's 18% interest for 72 years. But no, like it's not really an application. It's really what I took our handler sheet that we call it, and it's basically pedigree information on who are you, where do you live, how do you live, what kind of lifestyle are you living outside of work, what do you do at work? Is it a company car? Is it a Explorer? Is it whatever? What are your responsibilities? Are you like a patrol officer? Are you a battalion chief? Are you a dispatcher? Like what hours do you work? Family members, strange animals in the house, all these different things. And then like a paragraph or whatever of how do you see this dog affecting the office, and how do you anticipate using it? And then we go from there and select dogs. and see what we have available. If I don't have anything that fits them right now, then I start recruiting for that.
Okay.
And then we start training for it. So I mentioned earlier about aircraft. Like, I didn't expect a sheriff's office to want to put one of their dogs on an aircraft. Like, where I come from, that's not really a thing, but they do. So now we train for that, right? Or Marine units, like, Springfield, Missouri doesn't have a Marine unit that I'm aware of. At least they didn't back in the day. So I didn't think about that, but now we train for that. We train the boats. We train all that stuff. We train like the fire retardant chemicals. We train all the turnout gear, metal detectors, the tones. The tones have been a big deal for fire departments.
Oh, right.
Gun leather tastes delicious to dogs. So you expose them to that.
Oh.
And you do training for it so that the Sarge doesn't wake up and his expensive gun belt has been eaten through, right? So it's all those different things is part of that.
That's a lot to take into consideration when building.
There's a lot. So, but we've taken the hard part out of it for the officers and the agency. So usually what I hear is, that's all, that's simple. And I kind of want that, right? So if I'm approaching a sheriff's office, they're stoic by nature. Nobody wants to help them. Nobody ever wants to help them. And when they do, they've got there's something wrong. Mm-hmm. So they're super suspicious, right? What's going on? What do you get out of it? Like, maybe make an Instagram post or something. I don't know.
Spread the word here. Yeah, that's all I want.
That's what, we're like, this should be easy. It should be an enabler, right? It shouldn't hurt you at all. So if it does, then we need to rethink what we're doing.
Right.
Yeah, I've had the same experience. We have a content series on social media called Minute of Service, where the team and I, we insert ourselves with police officers, first responders, anyone continuing service, really. But on that trauma level, we're always able to have those conversations and that relatability with hard time in service, what they go through. And sure, there might not be anything happening, but we're able to have a relationship that leads to content, that leads to letting the service member drop their guard down, and then we can help them with the mental health services that we have. One thing Randy taught me, and I believe you said you coached Mr. Randy. Shout out to our buddy Randy, but the term of putting the medicine in the cheese and giving it to the dog.
Yeah.
Like, that is something we've seen success on Minute of Service, when talking to these organizations. And like you said, the police officers and firefighters are not thought of.
No, they're not. It's one of those things. You see them, they've shut down the highway. You see them and somebody's dead. It's always negative. And we don't want to think about negative as a society. We want to think positive, happy rays of sunshine, and we want to be in her little bubble. But you can't do it. You can't stay like that forever. So you have to support those that serve, period. Otherwise, they're going to stop serving. Or if they don't, their level of service, their productivity is going to decrease, and then they're going to commit suicide.
And that affects the community, and the list goes from there. No, there's a reason why we say support those who serve here at Grunt Style, and we're honored to be partnering with you guys, and honored to be sitting here next to you, Sydney, and you being involved with this. I know when I brought this conversation up, you were jumped.
I jumped. I had to at least meet you and hear what this was about at a deeper level past the website, because what you're doing is incredible, and I think that the fact that it starts with just a simple conversation and the introduction is what takes that guard down, and that is what aids in the healing, even past the dog, and that community that you've built, and being able to be partnered with Grunt Style, who just keeps the word alive.
Yeah. There's platforms, and then there's platforms, right? There's people that have good intentions, and then there's people that have good intentions and can do it. And I think that's kind of where we're at with our relationship with Grunt Style. Mm-hmm. It's good people always seem to find good people, and people that talk about service and continuing to serve. It's it's more, not to be weird and cheesy, but it's more of a community than most people understand. Being driven to help other people is more of a calling, and there's aspects and ways we do that, and we fund those ventures, right? People might change oil in cars to be able to do a meal on wheel or something, and ours is we're working with the Grunt Style, and you guys are doing your thing, and we're all using our platforms to help other people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah, a lot of selfless service. None of it is for us. It's for the people we serve. We're at the end of the day, we're just a t-shirt company.
Right. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I have dogs, right? But it's what we do with them. It's what we do with all that influence, all that information that really matters.
Absolutely.
And I think when people realize that you're real and you don't have an ulterior motive, that this is legitimate, I think that's when things start to really like percolate and people really start changing things.
The changes now.
Yeah.
It's happening.
Yeah. I mean, you can't put it off, right? I mean, so much of mental health is people putting it off and saying, well, I thought maybe later I'd check that out or have a doctor, do something for me, or we talk about it, but they don't. They go home and they compensate with booze or
vices,
all the vices. They have family problems. It is what it is.
Yeah, we have a lot of mental health conversations on AmericanGrit.com, and it's unfortunate because we should have a space for this. And that's kind of what we aimed for at Grunt Stop when we create this content, put the medicine in the cheese and give it to the dog. We're just creating spaces for these conversations to happen.
Yeah, it's a delivery mechanism, right? So, and next month is Mental Health Awareness Month, so it's perfect. It's one of those things where people need to see the content more than once a year. They need to see it more than once a year because they need to know that that's out there. But what if one person saw it and thought, hey, I know a guy who may be struggling, so now I'm just going to ask him a question.
Exactly.
Just one little minor influence. And maybe you don't need a dog, but maybe you need to talk to somebody. So
that all goes back to the conversation, and the more conversation, the more normal it is for people to be able to open up and get help.
Yeah, the stigma behind asking for help is terrible with the warriors and first responders. Like, do not ask for help.
I feel like we're around the corner for that.
I think so.
I believe so, especially with the conversations that we're having with the Grunt Stop Foundation, the organizations that we partner with, the influencers that we work with, the nonprofits. We're all marching the same beat there.
Good.
And it's all under the selfish service of support those who serve.
Right.
So on behalf of the brand, I want to say thank you for dedicating to this space within the community, to think about the journey of the veteran from transitioning to service all the way to where we say our goodbyes to them. There's not a lot of people who are committed to that. So, hats off to you and the K9 organization for always having the right foot forward. There's a lot of bad shit out there. We see it all the time, and like you said earlier, with veterans especially, we will see through that bullshit.
Sure.
So thank you for the authenticity, the leadership in 2020 where that unfortunate event happened, but we're able to potentially prevent more of that.
Yeah. Well, I can't take credit for the station dog. My mentor is actually the one that did it, and she's phenomenal, just a phenomenal person. She's the one that pulled the, lack of better terms, pulled the trigger on the program, right?
She's terrible.
Which is terrible. She's the one that started it. She's the one that said, hey, let's try this. And then enabled me to be creative with what I needed to do to kind of grow it, expand it, and make it real. So, yeah.
So where can people find K9 For Warriors?
You can find us online, K9sforwarriors.org, or you can find us on social media. I don't know how that works, but...
Instagram,
probably
YouTube,
the TikTok.
So
TikTok.
it's K and then 9, not spelled out.
It's
K9.
K9s For Warriors.org.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that. And Sydney, you also have a pretty powerful platform. I'd love for you to plug so people can follow your platform and be involved in the messaging you're doing.
Thank you. It's just at Sydney Gabower. Do you want to spell it?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. It's SIDNEYGABOWER. It's hard to pronounce the last name, so I always ask. But that's my main page, and that's where I've been really trying to integrate more of this and, speaking to people that inspire me about what inspires me and motivates me. And this is checking every single box because what you're doing is incredible.
Cool.
Yeah, and for more content with K9 For Warriors, anything mental health related, if you want to get involved with the Grunt Style Foundation, visit AmericanGrit.com, subscribe, check out all the body stacking content we have. There are multiple podcasts like this that are on American Grit. And check out Minute of Service. For all you law enforcement, first responders out there, we are there next to you. And the more we can understand, the more we can support and show up in these communities. So, Greg, thank you. Sydney, thank you. This has been another episode of American Grit. And until next time, we'll see you soon.